Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansion bright and blessed, he'll prepare us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all sing Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds below us rend the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow of sun. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all sing Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory, will the cross of life reflect. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all sing Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Now let's go to, let me get there first, I guess. 712. 712. Trouble sometimes hard, feeling its heart's wind, freedom we all near, now just stay. Come and give hearts to God, sing the chastening Lord, sing away pilgrims from Christians away. Jesus coming soon, morning or night or noon, many will meet there, trumps will sound. Oh, the days of flashing in the skies, going where no one flies ever bound. Love so many go losing their homes of gold. This God's word is told, leaves us bound. When signs come to pass, daring to hit and flash, it will come very fast, drops will sound. Jesus coming soon, morning or night or noon, it will make the trumps will sound. Oh, the days of life, rising in the sky, going where no one lies ever down. Fell so soon before, and forevermore, when we on that shore, we won't care anymore. Bask up in the sky, telling this world goodbye. Only then will fly curses away. Jesus coming soon, morning or night or noon, we will meet there, troubles will sound. All the days shall rise like sleep in the skies, going where no one can find.
We sang songs about heaven, so I'm going to read a heaven text. This is in Revelation 21, first 6 or 8 verses. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell among them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of water of life without end. Will you pray with me? You know, last night we got the news that a dear friend had died. He had a brain tumor, and it was quick. And so he was one of my heroes of faith. And this is a text for him. Will you pray with me? Father, we do believe you and love you, and we come as thirsty souls, wanting for you to give us the water of life, the freedom from pain and death and sorrow and mourning and crying. And we pray for that, Lord, and we can see your face to face. We do believe you and love you. Bless us tonight to worship and to hear your word, and take it in and believe it and live by it. For Jesus we pray. Amen.
Let's go to Genesis 16. Now, a good preacher could just shift gears and preach on heaven, since we have this emphasis going so far, but I'm not all that good, so I guess I'm going to have to stick with where I am, though I like the fact that Neil often leads about heaven. I think maybe the older we get and the more our body aches, maybe the more we think about heaven. I had one of our older members this morning tell me that she said, Steve, I went in and made arrangements for my funeral, and I put down that you would preach it. Are you okay with that? And I said, well, of course, I'd be honored to do your funeral. Would you like to go ahead and schedule it? Do you have that already worked? She said, I don't have that in the plan yet. I said, okay, well, all right then. It is interesting to me in Revelation 21 that he said that there will be no sea there. Anybody ever heard an explanation about why that is? You have? All right. Oh, here, let me give it to you. Go ahead, Mike.
You just asked me if I heard it.
Oh, now you got the mic. You got to explain it.
Well, I'm not sure that's what he's talking about in Revelation.
Yeah.
With the sea in the Old Testament are the roaring seas that
Mm-hmm.
represent the evil nations, and so it could mean that there's not going to be evil nations there.
Yeah. I think that it is certainly that water, the chaos waters, is a theme in the Old Testament of, and if you think about, living, well, we can see chaos waters, Texas, other such, but even in this world where they don't have control of that as well, that there will be, and it represents, there's this darkness, deep fear, you drown in there, and there's these creatures in there, but there'll be a river, this reference symbolically to the spring, but that's more of a calm, cool image, but this idea of chaos and unknown and fearfulness will not exist in that place. I think the more perhaps life that we live here that has chaos and struggle and unknown and twists and turns, the more we yearn for that place of calm and peace and healing. The story through Genesis is one where there are lots of chaos moments from the very beginning, the waters being separated to bring order into that, to the flood, and parting the Red Sea. Other things, we haven't got to that point yet. That's later, Exodus. But here we're going to talk about today Ishmael, which is, again, a story that has, we don't talk a lot about Ishmael, yet there's quite a bit about him. Why is he not often discussed, do you think? Yeah, we don't have a lot about him. It's also, his story is kind of sad in some ways, isn't it? I don't find him, I don't believe, in that record of great men and women of faith in Hebrews 11. But there is a lot, some interesting passages about him. We have to begin by remembering God has promised Abraham. What has God promised Abraham? Or Abram when he first meets him? Right, I'm going to make you into this great nation, which is significant because they don't even have a child and they're barren, old. So they kind of try to take some matters in his own hands. Chapter 13, the idea is maybe we can make Lot a relative in that role, and then maybe another person adopting a servant later, but it doesn't work. So then we have another plan here. Sarah has an idea. Chapter 16, starting in verse 1. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. By the way, where did they get this Egyptian servant? Yeah, and where they were just came out, right, from Egypt and such. So that may be kind of a part of that. But so Hagar and Sarah said to Abram, "Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go unto my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarah. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she had saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarah said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." And Abram said to Sarah, "Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please." And Sarah dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. What are some reactions you might have to this passage here? Anything in there stand out to you? Karen? Oh, 1 second. It seemed like I was reading comments online saying that people couldn't even hear with the mic. Is that? Oh, okay. So maybe when you have your thought, if you'll hold it a little closer so they can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, Sarah,
Well, it's on there, I think.
it was her idea to begin with to give Hagar to Abram. But then when Hagar conceived, she was upset and blames Abram for the whole thing.
Yes.
But he didn't respond like, "Well, it was your idea."
Yeah, that would be tempting to say, let's review. Whose idea was this in the first place? Yeah. Anybody else have any other thoughts, comments there? No, I'm not going to pursue that anymore there. Yep. Can I slide through here, Paul? Thanks.
Hagar considered herself equal with her mistress, and there can only be one woman of the house.
Yeah. There's a number of little realistic things going on here of life happening that little snapshots into it, isn't it? Just a reminder that Scripture isn't fantasy. This is real life circumstances unfolding, and the good, bad, and the ugly. Yeah. Did you have something?
The way the text reads seems to me to say, Abraham, you are the Lord of the whole household. You now own Hagar like you own me. She is in your power, but look what she is doing to me. To which Abraham responds, she's in your power. You do as you will. And so I think, in other words, there's a cultural thing that we don't exactly notice. We don't have to talk about whose fault is it.
Yeah.
It's whose ownership is it.
Yeah. that's a good point. Yeah. All right. So, a few things. Interesting. He's called. I don't know what does your version say at the end of verse 3. She became her husband and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. Does everybody have that same language? So she is a different status than slave, but yet not fully wife. We know that more because, that she'll still be referenced more as a concubine later in chapter 25. Isaac will be given inheritance, not Ishmael. So while she may be in the house a step up, she is not equal to Sarah. We're going to remember that as this dynamic moves forward. And of course, it's also interesting that we'll often have students will ask, well, why is it God's allowing multiple wives here? But I think it's also should note that never works out very well. We have these complicated dynamics, and then the children born to them, that becomes competition between wives and the children. Secondly, that was not God's original plan. One man, one woman, one flesh, right? So it may be permitted here, but it's not like there is any advantage with all this. Let's pick up. Yes, Deborah, hold on.
It does illustrate how people try to solve their own issue, but God had already promised them a son. And in the end, it wasn't necessary for them to do the things that they did,
Yeah.
But since they can't see how God's going to make it happen, they try to make it happen on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an important thing to note here. This whole mess starts when we don't take His promises and we try to do it our own way rather than God's way. Yeah, we don't wait. Yeah. Now, how long has He been waiting in Sarah? Well, they've been in Canaan here for 11 years. So, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't last, very long at all. I think if we're just saying, okay, God, without me becoming frustrated, that why are you not fulfilling this promise? Because why is that especially important for Abraham and Sarah? They're already old, and now they're, so the clock was stopped clicking a long time ago, ticking along there. That window is already passed, and now we're just getting further and further. So why does God keep them waiting? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought a major theme, as Mike's saying throughout the Old Testament, is, will you trust me to keep my promise? And I'm going to allow you to be in circumstances that will challenge that. And also, I want you to have no doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that when I fulfill the promise, it wasn't you that accomplished it. It wasn't luck. It was my power that made it happen. And that's also important. Yep.
Well, just to add to that, Paul makes the point in Romans 4 that Abraham was as good as dead at the time. And this has been a type, a visual of the resurrection of the dead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is a type of, and even one of new creation, that God is creating something out of where there is not life. He's going to make life. Yeah. So there's so many things going on here. Well, let's pick up now in verse 7, chapter 16. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from? Where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress, Sarah. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened. That's really what Ishmael means. God hears to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man. What does that mean? Anybody here like to be referred to as a wild donkey of a man? I don't think that's a compliment necessarily. But what might that imply? ADHD. Well, there's probably something stubbornness about that and obstinate, yeah. So anyway, wild donkey of a man, his hand against everybody and everybody's hand against him. That might help reveal even more this. He shall dwell over against his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God of seeing. For she said, truly here I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore the well was called Beer Lahathoroi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Any thoughts there and that stand out to you? Who is this angel of the Lord? That's an interesting phrase. We have angels mentioned. Of course, the word just means, messenger in itself. But angel of the Lord is kind of a unique title that we have more rare. That's a lot of people think that might be the pre-incarnate Christ here. That might be magnified because she said, you are the God of seeing. She responds to him in a way that seems to make his words equivalent to God. Mike?
Well, I was taught that when I was at Sunset.
Yeah.
And then I got to read in Hebrews.
Hmm.
Hebrews makes the argument that Jesus is the Lord.
You need to turn that toward you.
Jesus
Okay, go
was
on.
an angel according to the Hebrew letter,
Yeah,
which seems to
Yeah.
go against
Yeah.
the idea
Yeah.
that this is the pre-incarnate
Yeah.
Jesus.
that may be. Of course, the word angel just simply means messenger in itself, so that can be taken a lot of different ways. The same angel of the Lord title is used, I think, at when we get to Moses and the burning bush. Angel of the Lord speaks to him, and he worships. So there, at a minimum, there is something unique about this angel, but we don't know for certain. But that could be. And anything else in here stand out to you? The well here, the well is called the well of the living one who sees me. That's an interesting title, and calls him the God of seeing. Why is she focused on this seeing part? And does that make you think of anything else? Just this afternoon, first time I was thinking about John 4 and the Samaritan woman at the well, and how she rejoices that Jesus, she goes on, why she go rejoicing, telling everybody? He told me everything I'd done. And why would that matter? That she'd be so excited when, these were not great things that he told her that she had done. They were shameful things. But perhaps because he knew that about me, and still he offered me living water. I wonder about Hagar. Abraham. She'd probably heard stories, Abraham talking about God coming, and Sarah talking about the presence of God and the promise of God, but she's just a slave from Egypt, a nobody. And God comes to her. Which again, perhaps somebody in a moment, we often just sidestep, but for her it was significant, a very significant moment. And what does that angel tell her? Yeah, she's pregnant. And what does that pregnancy mean? What's going to happen? That God's going to make, through this child, a great nation for her. He's going to make her a multitude. How many kids will Ishmael have? 12. Interesting. There are similar interesting patterns between what will happen with Ishmael and Isaac. They will both become great nations. What's the challenge, though, with Ishmael's nation? There's the whole wild donkey part. They're just always going to be battling against people, and people are going to be battling against them. Well, it's a shame that prophecy didn't come to fruition. Oh, yeah. That people who think they're going to find peace in the Mideast and settle everything over there, that hasn't happened yet. But what's also interesting is from Russians to, well, just say every nation that's gone over there thinking they could subdue it have come back with their tail between their legs. It isn't going to happen. These are people for thousands of years that have just refused to be tamed, domesticated. It isn't going to happen. But it's still a great nation. And she takes a sense of peace in that. Verse 15, Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abraham called his name, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. What does it matter that Abraham names him? Yeah, it's an acceptance. You don't name a child you don't accept and recognize as your own. And he recognizes him, calls him Ishmael. And he's 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. So, let's go to chapter 21 now. Kind of make a jump in the storyline here. All right, let's read now. Starting in verse 8. So Isaac, verse 8, grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abram, laughing. Or did anybody else have a different word there than laughing? Mocking. I think laughing is more literal, but mocking is implied. So what was happened here, Hagar is being mistreated, and so she has left. Now, why was so Sarah's mistreating her, but why does Sarah have a strong reaction to Hagar? Well, she's pregnant, but also what was happening? Yeah, right. So he's the heir apparent, but also Hagar is disrespecting Sarah. So she's not a complete, she has added some fuel to the fire there. So but she's come back. Ishmael's born, but this has never been a happy, there's tension. And I'm sure Hagar is, and I want to be very careful with trying to put Hagar in today's terms of a mistress, right? She's a slave without any power and voice, and her only card is a child born to Abraham, right? So I don't want to try to dismiss her and even what she's jockeying for survival right now. But things are tense. And she sees Ishmael laughing at Isaac, mocking him. So what's the age? I think at this point, I think Ishmael may be around 16. I don't know if anybody has a notation of that. And
Abraham was 86.
Huh?
Abraham was 86 when Ishmael was born. He was 100. So
okay.
the difference is like 14, 13, 14.
Okay. So somewhere around 13, 14 years old, a difference between the age gap between them, and Isaac is not that old himself. So,
Although they did say sometimes they didn't wean them until like 6 years old, so he could be 3 to 6 years
Yeah.
old when he was weaned. So Ishmael could be
yeah.
21.
But there's a pretty good age gap here. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. And so she said to Abraham, verse 10, cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. That was the last straw, apparently. So, and the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. What do you think? How would you describe that reaction? I mean, Abraham loves Ishmael, too. And this whole thing is just distressing. But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For though Isaac shall be your offspring be named, I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness to Beersheba. I don't know how difficult that had to, if God had to tell him, go ahead and go through this, tells you probably that was a very difficult move for Abraham, to send Ishmael and Hagar into the wilderness with some water and food. I mean, how long is that going to last them? Yeah. Yeah, that had to be, you're right. Yeah. Because it would have been. You're pretty well sending them to their death, but God has said, again, you're trusting God. And what has God promised him about Ishmael? I'm going to make him to a great nation. Right? So it doesn't make sense. But if he reckons God can raise Isaac from the dead, then I figure he thinks he could raise Ishmael from the dead if he dies there.
It is odd, given how wealthy Abraham was, that he didn't give her a lot more money.
Yes.
Took him and take care of herself. It is like he left it up to God to help her survive.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that was the sense of trust that what was going to happen there. But yeah, he said, I'm going to make him a great nation. And they departed and wandered in the wilderness, Beersheba. And then the story gets pretty heavy. Verse 15. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes, and she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about a distance of a bow shot, for she said, let me not look on the death of this child. So she puts him under a bush and walks over because she doesn't want to see him die. It does make it sound like it, but he's got to be at least 16, but maybe his physically there's something going on. I don't know, but it does. I don't know. But you're right. It makes it sound like he's a lot more younger than he is. Or there may be other factors that have left him more vulnerable. As she sat opposite of him, she lifted up her voice and she wept. And God heard the voice of the boy, And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy, hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Well, anybody have any thoughts there on that part of the story? You know, it's yeah. That's a really good question, Paul. And I'm guessing when he sends her away, he's released her and sending her, so that sending her away has released her, so that she now, can, make her own choices and choices for Ishmael also. Yeah. But yeah. She's making choices for the family here, and directing things that she's no longer under his control. So he released her. Abraham turned her over to God. But Abraham knows God's got a plan for her, and through her is going to be a great nation. But also, the great nation coming through him is going to have challenges with the great nation coming through her. But it is God's will. So he releases all that.
In a lot of ways, the two sons, the two women represent two different categories of people, and that's illustrated in Romans when he brings out, the son of promise versus the son of the flesh. The flesh representing people that live in a way outside of God.
Yeah.
People of promise live with the hope that God, the promises that God had given them, with the hope that he will fulfill those promises. And, that comes up over and over with Jacob and Esau. It's the same sort of thing. They also both have 12 sons. And God watches over them, but he watches over them in a different way, because one group is the group of promise, and they do look to that promise in the future for things that they believe God will provide that they never lived to see. And the other group tends to, as he's described, a wild donkey of a man, not really. And Esau, his stomach was his God, traded his inheritance for one bowl. But that kind of illustrates the difference, and I think that is one reason why God allowed them to attempt to work it out in their own way, to contrast. God knows what he's doing. If you'll just trust him long enough, hang in there, he does have a path and a plan that's better than if you try to figure out your life without it.
Yeah, and that's an important argument that he's going to make in Romans with Jacob and Esau, which Jews say, well, why did God, it's not fair. Well, who says God's got to be fair? God's got a plan. He's unfolding things as he wills, and God gets to do that. And in Galatians chapter 4, he kind of makes this, he makes an analogy through the children of Hagar versus the sons of Hagar and the sons of Sarah, being free, Hagar being one of slavery, Sarah being one of freedom, where in Galatians he's making a strong case about children, people who are under the law who believe you have to keep the law, the works of the law, the Torah to be saved, are the children of Hagar. And he goes back and looks when Hagar was kind of mocking or disrespecting Sarah as a play on the people of the law, Jews who are doing that to Gentiles. But the Gentiles, right, they're the people, truly the ones of the free. So it's really kind of flipping on its head, implying these Gentiles are really kind of the true Israel. And the Jews who insist on the law to be upheld, to be right with God, they are more like children of Hagar because they're still caught up as slaves. So he'll make that play later, but he never really mentions Ishmael by name there, but he's clearly talking about it. But it's more metaphorical in his purposes. Hold on. You gotta have the mic, Jim. There we go.
Throughout this time period, we refer to this as the patriarchal period, and really women, wives, are about one notch above a slave.
Yeah.
But yet, we see Sarah all through this story having a pretty active role.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the one that says, here's what we're going to do with, the slave woman. And then here now in this passage we're looking at now, she decides to get rid of him. And verse 11 says that this was displeasing to Abraham, but yet he goes ahead and goes too. So even though they may not have a prominent role, they evidently had quite a bit of influence over the patriarch.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Let me just, in closing, offer a few thoughts about the nation of the wild donkey. So Muslims today, and again, I'm not in any way an expert on all these things, but and there are adherents of those who adhere to Islam, which professes that Allah, God, gave these revelations to a prophet named Muhammad. And Muhammad was at the age of 40, began to preach and had these writings and wanted to establish a theocentric nation. And we're talking around 622 AD, and those revelations were collected in a work called the Quran. And the Quran identifies Ishmael as, it doesn't mention him that often, but it identifies him as the prophet inspired by God. And that's how they connect through Ishmael, that they are the great nation that was promised to Ishmael. And they actually, in some of the writings, even included that Ishmael volunteered to be sacrificed instead of Isaac. So there's a number of interesting crossovers in the story. Their legend says that Abraham and Ishmael built Kaaba, which was a shrine in Mecca, the holy city, the most holy city in western Saudi Arabia to the Muslims. That's the city that they pray toward when they pray. And tradition says that Hagar and Ishmael were buried there. In fact, also their tradition says that Hagar will end up Abraham leaves Sarah to marry Hagar and go back with her. So it's just interesting how their story tries to still reclaim him to Islam. I don't know what else I think might need to be said about all that. Anybody else have any other thoughts there? Of course, again, I'm not going to spend much time talking about Muslim. I don't really know that much about it, but just to note that they track their story here through this, and especially from Christians when they begin battling against crusaders. Many Christians will really lock in on this idea of a people who are, the wild donkey of a man, people who have their hand against everybody else. That will become even more perceived in Genesis 16. Yeah. 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 That's a great point, because then we'll get to when the Jews are in bondage in Egypt and they cry out to God in Exodus 3. He hears their groaning and is moved. But he had been hearing and moving even for the voice of Ishmael and a slave mother in the middle of the wilderness dying. He hears that voice and is moved to action. And in his divine will make them also into a great nation. You know, it's important perhaps at times to remember, especially today when we are, all this about, again, whether the Jews and Muslims and the battle, and it can be easy to perceive that Jews are God's righteous people and these Muslims are children of the devil, and to forget they are children of Abraham. They were fulfillment of a promise by God of the love of Abraham. So they are a people that also need the gospel just as much as the Jews do, and are lost just as much with everybody without that, to complete their story through Abraham. No.
And underneath all of these stories, the human factor where people, their pride, Sarah's pride, Hagar's pride, had that not all been going on, everything would have worked out differently. But it is a matter of both of them, having a lot of pride that makes everything, jealousy, all the things that of the flesh that make it turn bad.
Yeah, it just fits the theme, the motif, that God continues in spite of people's pride, people's faithlessness, people's lies. He continues to work through all of humanity's frailty and failures to complete his promise, All right. Thank you.
There are those here tonight who needed an opportunity to take the Lord's Supper. Okay. We have supplies. Everyone needs some here. So Jeff has supplies back there. If anyone else needs supplies, hold your hand up. Okay. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity to pause and to think about your Son and the sacrifice he made for us. Pray that these ones will take this opportunity to remember his body given there as a sacrifice for us, so that we can have forgiveness of sins. We pray that they will take this bread and use it as a memorial. In his Son's name we pray. Amen. Father, we know that your Son shed his blood there. His blood was given for us. We pray that you will always be humbled by that great sacrifice given for us. Pray that these will take this through the vine that we're so thankful for, and take that, remembering that blood. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Few announcements that we repeat. In preparation for the spring mission trip, we're collecting supplies in Magi boxes. Many of these supplies are needed on our own self at this time of year. Sound like back to school supplies look like from the list that was included in the bulletin this morning. So please think about that ministry. And then join us this Wednesday after Bible classes for snow cones and fellowship. Everyone's in. And I believe that remember Ann Deal will have an ablation procedure on her heart July the 30th. And Nancy Stewart has been diagnosed with pneumonia. And there's others that are in from surgery, and let's see, our sympathies extend to the Peterson family, the loss of Lori's father, Neil Loomis. Anything else we need to mention before the closing prayer? Stand and have dismiss closing prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for the day. We pray that our attention to your word and studying of your people from the very beginning, we pray that this has honored you, and we pray that this will bring our minds to think about you and your purpose for this world. We pray that we will strive to fit into your purpose and to do your will. We pray for forgiveness when we fall short. We pray that we will be there to do the things that you would have us to do. We pray for this world. We know that it's always been a world with a lot of turmoil and maybe cruelty and harm. We just pray for this world that you will intervene and you will bring about some better things than men will do on their own. We pray that you'll bless us as we depart this place and keep us safe. In your son's name we pray all these things.